morning began like any other at the small music academy. Parents walked through the hallway carrying folders, water bottles, and the hopeful excitement that always comes before a recital. Children tuned instruments in different rooms. Teachers moved around, preparing sheets, adjusting chairs, and organizing the order of performances. In the middle of all this activity, a quiet woman entered with her husband and their young son. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a place filled with confident musicians and polished parents. She wore a simple outfit, comfortable shoes, and carried herself in a soft, almost shy way. She didn't talk much and stayed close to her family. Her husband handled most conversations, signing the attendance sheet for their son and speaking with the instructor. The wife stayed near the wall, holding her bag with both hands, just observing the room. A few parents glanced at her and then looked away, not out of cruelty, but because she blended in so quietly that she didn't seem important. She looked like the kind of woman who had spent most of her life caring for others, rather than being noticed herself. Inside the academy, several teachers gathered near the piano, discussing a warm-up activity they planned to do before the recital. They joked among themselves, and the atmosphere felt light and easy, the way it always does when professionals talk about something they know well. One of the teachers, while laughing about who should do the demonstration, pointed jokingly toward the quiet woman. "Maybe she can try. Looks like she has plenty of free time," he said. A couple of other teachers chuckled lightly. It wasn't meant to be harmful, but the tone carried a hint of superiority. Some parents turned toward the woman, following the teacher's gaze. A few even smiled in an amused way, as if the idea itself was funny this simple. Quiet wife sitting at a piano in front of trained musicians. The woman heard the comment, but her expression didn't change. She simply looked down at her hands, not angry, not embarrassed, just calm, like someone used to small humiliations that life throws at gentle people. Her husband noticed the laughter. He stepped slightly closer to her, giving her a small look of support. But she shook her head subtly, silently telling him not to worry. She wasn't hurt. She was just used to being underestimated. The children were called into a practice group. The room grew more active. The wife moved to sit on one of the chairs in the back, away from the crowd. Her son, excited for his rehearsal, waved at her before running inside. She smiled quietly at him, her eyes soft with love. While waiting, she listened to the sounds coming from the practice room. Some children were playing pieces they had been working on for weeks. Others struggled with difficult notes. Teachers corrected their posture, their fingers, their timing. Then she heard someone mention a piece one that filled the room with mixed reactions. That composition again. One teacher groaned, "That's too advanced." "Even I don't attempt it," another replied. "It's too fast, too technical." "The rhythm shifts are insane," a parent added. "No way anyone here can play it clean." Someone else said to the wife. The comments were almost amusing. That piece had been her friend once. A long time ago, she had spent nights practicing it on an old upright piano, repeating the same bar dozens of times until her hands were sore. Back then, she was young, full of dreams, full of fire. Music had been her quiet world she had kept hidden from almost everyone in her life now. But those days were over. After marriage, she had put her piano aside, telling herself she would return to it one day. But life took over. Bills needed paying. Her son needed her time. Her husband's work schedule grew heavier, and so her music remained asleep inside her. like a dream locked in a box. While she sat thinking, one of the teachers walked by and noticed her again. With a half smile, he said, "You know, we're joking about it. But I'm serious. You're welcome to try the warm-up if you want. Maybe you've touched a piano before." His tone sounded playful, but there was a hint of mockery in it. A few parents nearby looked over, waiting to see her reaction. She replied politely, "No, thank you." She didn't say more. She didn't try to defend herself. She chose silence, the same silence she had learnt to use whenever people assumed she was less capable than she really was. But some of the parents didn't let it go. One leaned forward and whispered loudly to the others, "Simple women like her usually don't know anything about music. She probably came only to watch." A small wave of laughter passed through the group. Her husband heard the remark and stepped forward, ready to say something, but she gently touched his arm. Her eyes told him it wasn't worth the trouble. She had lived long enough to know that people who judge quickly rarely listen to explanations. A moment later, the main instructor clapped his hands to gather everyone's attention. "All right, we're going to choose one parent volunteer to demonstrate the basic warm-up," he announced. "Anyone interested?" The room fell silent, and people avoided eye contact. No one wanted to be embarrassed in front of trained teachers. But then the earlier teasing teacher grinned and said, "Well, we already have a suggestion. Why don't we try asking her again?" He pointed toward the quiet wife. A few parents chuckled, expecting her to refuse and walk out in embarrassment. But this time, something changed inside her. Maybe it was her son watching from the practice room window. Maybe it was her husband's tired eyes, wishing people would treat her better. Maybe it was the years she had spent hiding her talent for the sake of others. Or maybe she was simply tired of pretending she was ordinary. She stood up slowly, surprising everyone around her. "I'll do it," she said softly. The room went silent. The teachers exchanged looks, some amused, some doubtful, some even slightly uncomfortable. They hadn't expected her to accept the challenge. Parents turned their chairs to face the piano. Children peered out from behind the door. Even her husband stared at her with a mix of confusion and curiosity. She walked toward the piano, every step steady and calm. When she reached the bench, she gently wiped the dust from the corner of the keys. A small gesture that came naturally. One she had done thousands of times in the past. The teacher who had teased her earlier stood nearby with crossed arms. "It's fine," he said, with a kind of tone that sounded cheerful but wasn't. "Just something simple. Don't stress." She nodded, not because she needed his permission, but because politeness was part of who she was. As she sat down, her hands hovered above the keys. She didn't touch them yet. Her fingers felt warm, almost excited, as if they recognized the familiar position. A memory flashed in her mind: late nights, dim lights, a younger version of herself moving her hands over the keys with passion and ambition. The teachers didn't know the truth. The parents didn't know it either. No one knew she had once been close to entering a professional music college before her life took a different path. No one knew she could play that feared piece from memory, every note of it still alive in her heart. The instructor cleared his throat. "Just a basic warm-up, please." But she had something else in mind. She looked around the room one more time. She saw the same people who had mocked her, the same faces who had judged her without knowing her story. And then she looked at her son. He stood behind the door, watching her with wide, innocent eyes. In that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. She would show them, not for revenge, not out of pride, but simply to finally step into the light she had been running from. For years, she placed her fingers on the keys. The room waited, and then came the first note. Everyone inside the hall slowly went silent, but the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It was heavy, almost like the air had thickened. People stared at her with confused faces, some with raised eyebrows, some whispering under their breath. They all seemed surprised that she was still standing there, ready to take the teacher's challenge seriously. Her husband sat in the front row, looking even more nervous than her. He kept shifting in his seat, pressing his hands together like he was trying to hide his embarrassment. A few people around him whispered loud enough for anyone to hear. Why did he bring her here? She should just sit down. This is going to be embarrassing. But she didn't look at them. She didn't even look at the teacher now. Her eyes were fixed only on the piano keys. Even though she was still standing several steps away from it, something inside her felt strangely calm. And yet, her heart was beating. So loudly she was sure everyone close to her could hear it. The teacher stepped back from the piano with a proud smile. The kind of smile people have when they're sure someone is going to fail. "Please," he said loudly, so everyone could hear, "show us what kind of skill you think you have." A tiny laugh spread through the students behind him. Some even covered their mouths, trying and failing to hide their amusement. She didn't respond to any of it. She just took a slow breath and walked toward the piano. Each step echoed on the wooden floor. The teachers crossed their arms. A few students leaned forward with excitement, waiting for a disaster they could talk about later. Her hands were shaking, but not because of fear. It was something else. A strange kind of excitement. A feeling she hadn't felt for years. When she finally sat on the piano bench, 1,000 memories rushed through her. Memories of being younger, sitting in her uncle's small room, learning piano on an old keyboard that had several broken keys. He used to say, "You don't need a perfect instrument. You just need a perfect heart while playing." She didn't have talent, at least not in the beginning. She remembered how she used to struggle, how she practiced late at night while everyone slept, how she cried quietly when she couldn't get a part right. But she also remembered how much she loved it, how the sound of each note made her feel alive. Life had changed. She got married. She left her hometown. She became busy with daily routines, cooking, cleaning, helping her husband with whatever he needed. Music slowly faded into the background. She didn't stop loving it, but there was never any time to return to it until today. She placed her fingers gently on the keys. All the noise in the hall felt far away now. The room was full, but she felt alone with the instrument, like the world outside didn't exist. For a moment, she didn't move. Everyone held their breath, some expecting a wrong note, others expecting her to freeze completely, but then something unexpected happened. She closed her eyes, not because she was scared, but because she remembered every note of that difficult piece in her heart. The same piece the teachers always warned their students about. The same piece even the senior performers avoided because of how complicated it was. Then she played the first note, and the room changed. The sound was soft, almost whisper-like, but full of emotion. People immediately stopped moving. It wasn't just the accuracy, it was the feeling behind the notes. Her fingers moved with a confidence that shocked everyone watching. Her hands didn't tremble anymore. They glided smoothly from one key to another, like she had been practicing for years, without stopping. The teacher who had mocked her earlier straightened his back. His smile slowly faded. Another teacher beside him blinked twice, not believing what he was hearing. She continued playing, and the music began to fill every corner of the hall. Students who were laughing earlier now looked stunned. The sound was powerful, yet gentle, emotional, yet precise. It felt alive. It felt real. It felt like she wasn't just playing music. She was telling a story. People had come expecting a joke, but what they witnessed was something unforgettable. Even her husband, who had been slouching in embarrassment minutes earlier, was now sitting straight, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. He had never seen her play like this. He had known she liked music. He had even seen her hum or tap her fingers sometimes. But he had no idea she carried such a deep skill inside her. He didn't know she was capable of something like this, something this beautiful. The piece grew more complicated. Rapid notes, sharp transitions, jumps across the keyboard that demanded perfect control. Many performers avoided this part because it required not just skill but courage. But she didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved faster, stronger. The audience watched in complete silence, afraid to even blink. It was like her hands didn't belong to her anymore. They belonged to the music. They followed a memory she had kept hidden deep inside for years. At one point, a teacher whispered to another, "This shouldn't be possible. People don't forget a piece like this unless they were trained at a high level." But that wasn't the truth. She wasn't trained at any academy. She wasn't taught by experts. She wasn't given professional lessons. She simply practiced with love something no school could teach. The hall remained silent for the entire performance until she reached the last few notes. They were soft, delicate, and full of emotion. She played them like someone saying goodbye to a friend they missed for years. Then her fingers stopped. The final note lingered in the air, fading slowly, gently, almost painfully. There was no clapping. Not because people didn't want to, but because they were too stunned to move. She opened her eyes, unsure of what to expect. Her heart raced again, but this time from anticipation, not fear. She slowly looked around. Everyone was staring at her with wide eyes. Every teacher, every student. Even her husband, the teacher who mocked her earlier, took a step forward. His confident expression had vanished completely. He looked almost embarrassed, as if he wanted to apologize but didn't know how. He cleared his throat softly. "That," he said, struggling to find the right words, "was exceptional." The students behind him nodded slowly, still processing what they had just heard. Her husband stood up suddenly, unable to stay seated any longer. His face was full of pride, mixed with shock. He clapped once, only once, but the sound echoed in the silent hall. Then someone else clapped, then another. Within seconds, the entire hall erupted in applause. Loud, genuine, overwhelming applause. People stood from their seats. Some even had tears in their eyes. She didn't know what to do. She hadn't expected this. She had only wanted to help her husband, to take away his embarrassment. She never imagined the entire hall would cheer for her like she was a star performer. Her husband rushed toward her, voice shaking with pride. I didn't know you could do that." She smiled softly, still catching her breath. "I didn't know I still could." The teachers approached her with respectful expressions now. One of them asked if she had ever performed professionally. Another asked where she had learned. A third even invited her to perform at an upcoming concert. She was overwhelmed. All she had done was sit down and play something she had carried in her heart for years. But the impact was much bigger than she ever expected. As the applause continued, she looked at her husband. He wasn't hiding his face anymore. He was standing tall, proud, smiling wider than she had ever seen him smile. That moment was worth more than all. The praise in the room. She hadn't come to prove anything. She hadn't come to challenge anyone. She just wanted to support him. But in doing so, she revealed something beautiful, that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest talent. And sometimes the ones the world underestimates the most are the ones who shine the brightest.